Has some handball, still a chance, is it a goal? It is! He's got the big goal! He's got the premiership! Goes behind, little crossover, step back, wide open, and it's good! Got much help. Oh, he doesn't need any help. How about that?
This is the World of Sport.
Welcome to another episode of the World of Sport podcast, brought to you by Pizza Stride and Bar. I'm Jimmy, and with me is Mitch and Joe. Another big week of sport, but we'll start with the NRL. A lot of controversy in inverted commas. I didn't think there was... Obviously, the decision is probably a bit dodgy, but overall, I think best team of the year one. Joe, you're our resident NRL expert. How did you see the game?
Use the term expert very, very loosely. It was a good game. I think that the better team won at the end of the day. The Roosters had been pretty much the best team all year. Like, they might not have finished first, but in terms of having the best quality side and some of the best quality coaching, I think they were the best team all year and were definitely the team to beat coming into the finals. Canberra, I think, exceeded expectations, to say the least, actually. Like, going into halftime 8-6, and then the next sort of 30 minutes of the game really being in their favour. They definitely had Sydney on the ropes. There was a few controversial calls, like you said, especially the infamous 6 to go. That was called late in the second half. But I think it really didn't make... it made a difference, but I don't think it was the ultimate deciding factor. It wasn't like a penalty from right in front where they were down by 2 and they kicked it to win or anything like that. Sure, they did go down and score, but they still have to go down and score. Like, that happened on the 20-metre line or whatever. They still travelled like 80 metres in that set of 6 for James Tedesco to score. So it's like...
It's an easy scapegoat for Raiders fans and NRL fans in general to have something to be mad at the governing body.
Yeah, absolutely. Exactly what you said. It's an easy scapegoat instead of... Everybody hates Sydney at the moment. Ever since, I guess, sort of the salary cap rot. And then being so successful the last few years, just like any sport, the most successful team, the Patriots,
I hate the Patriots.
So does everybody else. So it's very much the Roosters, especially the last few years, have been very much the Patriots of the NRL. So, like you said, very easy scapegoat to point to the refereeing. But outside of that, it was a really good game.
Yeah, I thought originally, as we were talking before we started recording, I think everyone in the room thought the Roosters were going to run away with it. After getting an early try in the first 10 minutes. I was, oh no, here we go again. This is going to be AFL Grand Final 2.0. But to Canberra's credit, they came out with Raider football at its finest, defence first, and they really pushed the Roosters. As you were saying with the controversial call, they had half an hour of dominance plus an extra man and still couldn't score. And you can complain all you want as Raiders that the call cost you the game, which it probably did at the end of the day. But you also got to give credit to the Rooster defence for holding strong for that long with a man down. I mean, when the final horn or whatever it is, the siren blew, I don't think any of the Roosters had any energy left to celebrate. They just sort of collapsed and were like, just, making contact with each other like, yep, you're still alive, cool, we just won. Give me like 10 and some Powerade and we'll start celebrating.
Yeah, and like you said, it's different to have Cooper Cronk off as well. So a lot of halfbacks, a lot of 5'8" in the NRL defensive liabilities. Jonathan Thurston, I guess, number one example. So they'll hide him on usually the left wing in between the centre and the 5'8" and sort of shield him away because teams will run at him. He's a terrible, like Jonathan Thurston was a terrible defender, and they would just run at him for 80 minutes. Cooper Cronk is the exact opposite. Cooper Cronk is a very strong defensive halfback. Like, even if it is 70 minutes, he made 20 tackles, 95% tackle efficiency. Like, he is... Despite his very diminutive stature, he is quite a stalwart on defense. He's not an easy target. So it wasn't like they just took out any old halfback, like taking out Cooper Cronk is a big deal for the Roosters' defence, and he does a lot of traffic directing, as does James Tedesco at the back. So it did cause a bit of a shuffle around. Latrell Mitchell, they were short down Latrell Mitchell's side, but luckily between him and Boyd Cordner, they were able to fill the gap and did really, really well while Cooper was off. So blame it on whatever you want. Like I said, at the end of the day, the Roosters were the better team. They have been all year. Canberra had a valiant effort. Obviously, everyone was going for them. They were the underdog. Hadn't won a premiership for however many years. And had some injury concerns going into the week. Jack Whitten had some injury issues. Their dummy half had the flu or something, and they had to isolate him. It was a whole thing. But I think at the end of the day, the Roosters won, and that's how it should be, I guess.
Yeah, it's probably justice on the last couple of years combined. Raiders fans will feel aggrieved on the day, and they have all credit to feel however they want to feel. They have the excuse there why they don't have a premiership, but at the end of the day, excuses don't win premierships, and excuses won't make up for missed opportunities. So, just ask Melbourne. They'll probably feel aggrieved against the Roosters last week, and that didn't get them into a grand final either. So, and Cooper Cronk, as you said, a very good defensive halfback, and that proved last week he was probably the big reason why they made it into the grand final in the first place with some last-ditch tackles. So, massive loss for them with the sin bin. Do you reckon it was a sin bin?
The Cooper Cronk.
Yeah, the Cooper Cronk.
Technically, by the rules, it is a sin bin. He hit the guy before he had the ball. He hit, I think it was Josh Apali, before he had the ball.
Technically.
He did. Half a second before he would have caught, before he made contact with the ball, Cooper Cronk bumped him. Technically, by the rules, should it be a sin bin? Yes. Do I think it should be a sin bin? That's what the rule should be? No. I think it's very much... I think something like that needs to be a situational type thing. You look at it and go, was Josh Parley really in chance of scoring? If Josh Parley's not catching that ball anyway, I think he's probably going to drop it, whether Cooper Cronk hits him or not. So, at the end of the day, was it a sin bin? Yes. I think the referees made the right call, but... I don't have any issue with it. I think the rule might need some reviewing, and I think a few rules are going to come into review, just being that we've had a few questionable decisions in the last few weeks, especially in finals when the spotlight is on. I wouldn't be surprised if the ARL body does some reviewing and sort of find every year they change how the bunker gets involved. They change some every year they make changes. So. I think this year is going to be no different.
Yeah, I think in particular the bunker will get a review, as you just said. My gripe with technology in sport, and this is something that I've been talking with Pete about when we talk about football, is that it's kind of this. People won't admit it, but it needs to be all or nothing, all or just the key factors in a game. For instance, in football or soccer, whether it crossed the line or not, and then everything else is up to the on-field, or everything is reviewed by VAR. And I think the same is kind of for AFL and NRL. NRL's a lot further down the line with technology, so you're always going to get this inconsistency or this discrepancy with technology if you don't use it for everything, like we saw with the Melbourne game last week, where the bunker could have easily just talked to the ref in his ear and said, that came off a Roosters player, it should be a Melbourne scrum. You lose absolutely no time whatsoever and the right call is made. And that's in favour of the bunker doing everything, but then you also have the negative of the bunker doing absolutely everything. The game gets stagnated. You never really know if your try is a try. What's the point of celebrating, because it's most likely going to get called back anyway. It becomes technicalities problems with rules arise because of the technicalities of slow motion and whatnot. And you just end up in this grey area of rules year after year after year because it's a sport at the end of the day. It's opinionated. There's no right or wrong way to do anything. So
Yeah, I agree. Like if I had, like if it was up to me, I'd set it back to the NRL about 5 years ago, where they had the video referee for in-try decisions, and that was it. Whether the ball was put down, and that was pretty much it. Whether they dropped it or he scored a try. They couldn't review forward passes, which they still can't. They also couldn't review, I want to call it offensive interference, but that's not what it's called. Like a shepherd or whatever it's called, the technical term. Like the offensive player obstructing any of the defenders. You couldn't review any of that. The only thing you could review on the video referee was whether or not the ball was placed in the in goal. That was the very first like iteration of video refereeing, and I think it worked really well. But then you have guys stepping out or, forward passes and things like that. And it just, exactly what you said, it just sort of starts to creep more and more and more, and then it encompasses more of the game. It definitely needs a review. They pay $6 million a year for this bunker. And they, like when they first rolled it out, it was very much there'll be no more mistakes. Like, paying $6 million for all these experts to sit in a room remotely, not affected by the crowd or the refereeing or anything like that, to look at things from every angle, slow motion, slow it down, turn it around. And they're still having issues. So
along with the rhyme, upside down.
So yeah, I think there's going to be a review, exactly what you said. I think with the all or nothing, exactly, like 5 years ago, it's very similar to soccer. Soccer, it's whether the ball passes like across the line or not. And it was very similar to the in goal, where if you put the ball down or not. And that was fine. But when you start to bring video refereeing into other facets of the game, I think you're going to run into issues all the time.
The problem is with the bunker or VAR or whatever system, whatever you want to call it, the ARC or whatever, it's still people reviewing technology. The technology doesn't make the decision. And also the governing body or whatever, FA, the football, the English Federation, the NRL, the AFL, or the ARL, whatever it be, they'll never throw their refs under the bus either, or the refs don't want to throw them under the bus. So you get this dynamic where even if the refs are wrong, clearly wrong, the AFL or the ARL or whoever will come out and say, oh, they technically made the right decision, or, it's just so much crap that comes with it as well. So I think, and it sounds ridiculous, but I kind of like the drama of man-made officiating errors, because you can look back on it with hindsight and say that's clear that's the wrong call. Whereas if you have technologies like that's clear, it was the wrong call. The bunker should have done something about it. This should have happened. That should have happened. And you just get more airy-fairy, argy-bargy, just stupid arguments. Whereas I feel like when you just have the flow of the game, it just feels more authentic. At least to me it does.
But what you're saying too is, okay, if you did decide to do that, okay, after the game, the governing body would say, oh, these refs made this mistake, this mistake, this mistake. And you also took it away and made it man-made. You're very much putting the referees on an island and saying, hey, you guys better make the right call. We're not going to give you any help. And if you don't make the right call, we're going to call you out on it. And it's not...
I'm not saying that they called them. I'm saying at the moment, at least in AFL, I'm not sure how it is in NRL specifically, but when an AFL with technology, when it needs to be, and this is very much a hot topic in the English Premier League at the moment, where it needs to be clear and obvious to overturn the referee's original decision. And I'm getting muddled up with all the sports, so I'll just stay specifically with the AFL. When the umpire made a clear error, and everyone in the footy world is like, Mitch, can you think of any examples off the top of your head? But there's been a few times there's been a clear and obvious error, and the AFL has come out and said, no, we technically agree with the umpire, and they refuse to throw them under the bus or refuse to acknowledge an error. Not even throw them under the bus. That's over the top. But refuse to acknowledge any error whatsoever from the umpires. And at the end of the day, we don't care if there's an error. We care that we learn from it and that we get better as a code. And we means everyone, every fan of every code whatsoever. So it's just this weird power dynamic where with technology and umpires, umpires become even more protected because of the technology. Whereas I think you'd get this dynamic where if it's just umpires and the minimum, did it cross the line or didn't cross the line, was it put down properly or not, then it's very much just umpires call, Umpires make mistakes, referees make mistakes.
Yeah, I agree. Like I said, if like for the NRL specifically, if you take it back to how it was like 4 or 5 years ago, when video refereeing was sort of first coming to the foray, I think that would be ideal. But no one's ever going to be happy. The teams aren't going to be happy. The officials aren't going to be happy, and the fans are never always going to be happy. There's always going to be issues of contention like this, which is good because we need something to talk about.
Fair enough. We'll leave the NRL there because we could bloody go on for ages. The UFC was on the weekend. Big fight for the Aussies and the Kiwis actually, with Whittaker versus Adesanya.
Adesanya, yeah, that's pretty good. Not bad.
Not very Kiwi.
No, he's it's because he's from Nigeria.
Yeah.
It was a really good card. The Kiwis went 3 from 3. Israel won, did exactly what he was going to do. Robert Whittaker came out and had probably a pretty poor game plan. Definitely should have tried to wrestle with him more, but decided you want to come out and try and prove a point that his striking was better. But like I said before, Israel Adesanya's got like 82 professional kickboxing fights, and he's like 75-6 or something. He's one of the best strikers in the world, if not probably the best striker in the world at the moment. You're not going to outstrike him, but you're bigger, you're stronger, your wrestling pedigree's a lot better. But going in there and not using it is just handicapping yourself.
You just look like a blind bull trying to get a hit from nothing, kind of.
Yeah, he'd rush him, which is what you need to do because Israel's so much taller and he's got a longer reach. So you have to go in low and fast to try and get inside that reach. But he had him backed up against the fence. Israel was keen to keep the distance. Had he kept him against the fence, wrestled him a lot more, shot for takedowns when his center of gravity was sort of moving back, I think he would have had a lot more success. But that's fighting at the end of the day. You get in there and it's very much a lot of your game plan goes out of the window. Stuff you've been rehearsing for weeks and months and whatever. It's just I don't know, you just default back to what you're most comfortable with at that time. So it's all well and good to be after the fight to be like, oh, you should have done this or you should have done this. But man, when you're in there and having some dude trying to take your head off, the game plans do tend to go away a lot more often than you'd expect.
But just looked like Whittaker didn't have a game plan, and it didn't look like he unfazed Adesanya. I mean, it just looked like the strikes from Whittaker were going in slow motion in front of Adesanya, and he just looked supremely comfortable in what Whittaker was doing to him and what he was doing in retaliation. He knew that if he's just going to keep rushing him, that he's going to get strikes and he can get out the way pretty quickly.
Yeah, and Israel's 18-0 now, but no one has really made a good effort to try and wrestle him and hold him against the fence. Some guys try and then they don't get it once and they just go, oh, it's fine, I'm just going to try and strike with him. It never works. So he's going to fight Paulo Costa or Yoel Romero next, who are two excellent wrestlers. So I'm happy he won, but I think the next time he runs into a legit wrestler who sticks to the game plan, I think he's going to be in a lot of trouble.
Guess we'll find out next time. The AFL season may well and truly be over now, and while we're all still a little disappointed that Richmond won the flag, except Richmond fans who
Flogs.
which was flag flogs.
who tore up, was it Swan Street?
Yep.
In spite of all that, trade talk is well and truly the talk of, well, at least Melbourne. Probably not Sydney. It's probably NRL up there. The big names, probably Essendon's at the forefront of trade talk, with Danaher, Fantasia potentially leaving. Although Essendon came out yesterday, I think, and said they expect both players to play in the Bombers' colours next season. We also have Kelly nominating West Coast, and Papley nominating Carlton, and Bradley Hill nominating St Kilda. So an interesting trade period. Let's start with the Bombers, just because I'm a Bombers supporter and I'm curious what other people think. Start with Danaher, who probably the biggest name to request a trade thus far. Yeah, I'll say that. He's requested Sydney, which is a bit of a weird move for Sydney, I think. You have Franklin. You have a pretty stacked forward line. Just need a midfield, a new midfield almost. So it's a bit of a weird move for them. But then again, potentially once in a generational player comes along, you can't really miss that opportunity. Bombers are naturally going to play hardball and want 2 first-rounders. There's talk pick 5 and pick 9. Pick 9 coming from Carlton for Papley. What do you think, Mitch? Do you reckon that's fair or overkill?
I mean, we have a disagreement about whether Joe Danaher is a once-in-a-generation player. But I think Sydney's looking for the future past Buddy. We saw this year that Buddy struggled to string a whole lot of games together. And
they struggled without Buddy as well.
Yeah, they've built the team around him, which you do for a player like Buddy, who I do think is a once-in-a-generational player. But he's got only a few years left to run in his contract, and I can't see him playing on past that. I mean, you look at the players that are retiring now, and they're all players that were drafted around him. So I don't think it's going to be too much longer that we get to see the Buddy show in the AFL. But I think if Sydney gives away 2 first-rounders for Joe Danaher, they're paying overs for him. For a guy that's played 7 matches in 2 years,
I think it might be 11.
I don't think I'll push you on that. He played 4 this year, and I think he played 3 last year. So, I mean, I wouldn't be paying that much, but at the same time, if you're Essendon and Sydney, once players have come out and nominated and said, I want to be traded away, you really want to get that deal done. You want to be seen to be doing the best by your players, and that's how you stay as a destination club.
Yeah. Well, I think the recent trend is that for a player of that caliber, the 2 first-rounders, you'd also get a second round from the Bombers in return, who have 2 second-rounders at the moment. So I imagine the Bombers would be giving, if the deal were to go how we expect it, with Papley leaving to Carlton for pick 9, the Swans would give 5, 9 in return for Danaher, the first second-round pick, and maybe a later pick as well.
Yeah, just steak knives on the end. I mean, if I'm Essendon, I'm wanting to get this deal done. I don't know exactly how long Danaher has left on his contract.
I believe 2 years.
Yeah, maybe 2 years. But even then, next year there's question marks over whether his body's right. And, I mean, even from Joe Danaher's point of view, I don't blame him for wanting to seek out a new club. Maybe he thinks he's had a bit of a rough stick with the medical staff, so wants to try his luck somewhere else.
Well, there was talk that he wasn't exactly honest with his injury and the progression he had, and that's why the Bombers picked him this season when he ended up playing. And so I think, from what I'm hearing from all reports, that some of the fault lies with Danaher for rushing his injury.
Oh, yeah. I definitely don't doubt that.
Regardless, I think that's irrelevant to the situation. There's talk that Danaher wants to get out of the Melbourne spotlight. He's had a torrid run of injuries. He comes from a line of, Bomber legends. And I think he just, given the injuries, given all the pressure on his shoulders, he just wants to go to a place where he can walk down the street and no one really cares who he is. And he gets a fresh start. And as you said, maybe his luck will turn at another place. And I think he'll end up going for 2 first-rounders. And I know we disagree potentially on whether he's worth 2 first-rounders. And at the end of the day, he was All-Australian, kicked 60 goals plus in 2017. At his best, he is one of the most talented forwards in the game and potentially the last 20 years. Potentially. Don't give me that look, Mitch.
I think there's a lot of key forwards that have played since 1999 that, could stake their claim ahead of Joe Danaher. I still don't know.
He's one of the most athletic forwards in the game.
Maybe.
You saw on Anzac Day up against Darcy Moore that he was one of the big reasons why the Bombers were so competitive in that game. And even though he had barely played any football, had been injury-riddled, he still showed his talent in bundles. And plus 2017, plus a new club, a new resurgency, whatever you want to call it, I think that's what he's looking for, to re-find his best form at a new club. And I think at his best, he is well and truly worth 2 first-rounders.
Yeah. Maybe. And I think if you look a couple of years ago, Hawthorn picked up Jago O'Meara and they had to pay 2 first-rounders. Well, they had to pay a first-rounder and a future first-rounder for him. And he was in a similar boat with injury. But I do think that was because Tony Cochrane was trying to make a point about, we are Gold Coast, we're not going to let our players go for little to nothing. And I think, if Danaher could go up to Sydney and play like he did a couple of years ago and be that forward that runs up and jumps at everything and kicks a truckload of goals, then, he's probably worth 2 first-rounders. But especially with his injury at his age, I don't know whether he will be able to be that type of player anymore. So, but I'd like to see the deal get done. I think it's in both teams' best interest to get this deal done. It's just, I think it's going to be a typical trade period scenario where there's a big logjam, and there's nothing stopping Essendon and Sydney doing the deal except Carlton, and Carlton's going to, I think, hold all the chips in this deal. And if I was Carlton, I'd be licking my lips. You can.
Well, on that point, Papley for pick 9. He's a small forward. I don't think he's worth anywhere. I think he's maybe worth a late first round, a bit like Fantasia. And we're just quick side note on Fantasia. I think he'll come out and request a trade to Port Adelaide, and Bombers will get a late first round, maybe early second round for him, which is, fair. For small forwards aren't hard to come by in today's market, I guess. So I think that'll get done. But pick 9 for Papley.
Fantasia's a good player and
injury riddled as well.
Yeah,
he has riddled.
He has had. Yeah, he has struggled to get string a whole lot of games together in a row. But, the risk you run, and Adelaide has run into this problem a lot of times, and you see a lot of Melbourne clubs are suffering it a bit at the moment, is players want to go home eventually. And so the risk you run drafting someone from South Australia is that eventually they'll want to go back home. If they want to settle down near family, then you've got to trade him back. So I think it's a better move from Essendon to trade him now rather than for him to walk away in free agency or be out of contract.
His girlfriend lives in Adelaide, from what Harry has told me.
Yeah.
And his whole family is in Adelaide. So I think he's expressed his desire to go eventually back to South Australia. So I think you say to him, look, buddy, we'd love you to stay on, but if we can get a first rounder for you, you get to go back home, we get a first rounder, and, it's a win-win for everyone.
Yeah, I think the destination clubs really set themselves apart by treating their players well, especially in this aspect of the game, because this is all part of the game, is the movements in the off season. And I think teams like Geelong and Hawthorn, and we'll see if Essendon does it, they'll say to their players, look, we know you want to go home, and we're going to do our best, and we're going to facilitate that for you. Or in Hawthorn's case recently, there's been ageing players on the list, and Hawthorn only will offer them a year on their contract. And they say, look, we know you probably want more job security than that, so we can facilitate you going somewhere else for a 3 or 4 year contract like they did to Jordan Lewis. And so I think if a team is seen to take care of their players like that, it makes it more appealing for players to come there. So I think it's in Essendon's best interest to take care of Fantasia getting back to Port Adelaide.
I think they will if he requests a trade. I think it'll be a pretty quick deal. I think Port are fairly interested as well in that regard. But yeah, I think it's a bit of a waiting game for Essendon and Port till Fantasia makes up his mind. I think the Danaher case, it's much more clear cut, as he has come out and requested a trade.
Yeah, and I didn't even answer your question about Papley. I think Papley's a very good small forward. I think there's a bit of question marks around whether he can run both ways and play defense, or whether he only runs downhill. But I think it's also, in terms of what he's worth, you got to look at not just what he's worth to the other 16 clubs, but what he's worth to Carlton. And I think they're really on the rise, and they're probably looking for that sort of small forward who's got about that 100 to 150 games experience, which I think Papley's right in there. And so I think they'll be willing to give a fair bit of stuff for him.
Well, at the end of the day, if you're going to spend that draft pick on that exact player, you may as well just get who you want from another club if it becomes available. So, yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, and I mean, if you think about it this way, you're essentially saying, if you're Carlton, you think of it like, okay, at pick 9 in the draft, if I could pick Tom Papley right now with pick 9, would you do it? Well, of course you would, because you know what you're getting from him. Rather than risking it on a young kid that might take a couple of years to come on, you can bring in a guy that you know what you're going to get, and you know he's a good player. So, I think it's a good move by Carlton. I think Sydney would love to get pick 9, and that would probably get the deal done with Essendon.
And Tim Kelly going back to West Coast or to Western Australia. I think the deal is almost certain to go through, but what do you think he'll end up going for? Geelong came out this week and said he's worth more than 2 first rounders, but he's out of contract. Geelong want to get the most out of him, and
this is a trap for West Coast. I think Geelong can really demand heaven and earth for Tim Kelly without really having to worry too much, because Tim Kelly's gone from Geelong. Like, he's not playing there next year, no matter what happens. If he hasn't signed his contract now, it means he's gone. So Geelong can say they want 3 first rounders if they really wanted to, and West Coast just got to say yes, because if they don't get this deal done, he's going to end up at Fremantle. Fremantle will pick him up in the draft. So, and no one else is going to touch him, because he'll play for 1 year wherever he is, and then they'll get nothing for him because he'll leave. So, I think it's all up to West Coast, and I think they run the danger of having to pay way overs for Tim Kelly when they already have a very strong midfield.
yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Gaff leaves, and potentially from the compensation of that, I think he'll end up going for 2 first rounders to Geelong. this year and potentially next year's, or maybe Gaff in return as well. Not sure. There's a lot of variables. I think both parties will get it done because they've had a year to. I think both of them have known for 12 months that Kelly was on his way to West Coast.
Yeah.
But if I was Geelong, I'd be saying, look, we know you want to get to Western Australia. Fremantle have the picks. We're going to deal with them if they give us the best deal. If West Coast come with, a ball-breaking deal. So, I don't know. I'd kind of be harsh on Kelly and be like, Fremantle's in Western Australia as well. Come on, man. If we get 2 better first rounders for you from Freo, we're just going to trade you to Freo.
Yeah, and they sort of did that a bit last year where he wanted to go back to WA, and I don't know whether at that stage it was I want to go to West Coast or I just want to go to either Perth team. And they said, no, you're not going, you're contracted, you're playing. So they have got a history of being tough, but if I was Geelong, I would say I'll give you Tim Kelly and you give me Elliot Yeo, and then obviously West Coast wouldn't do that deal, but you settle for gaff and some steak knives at the end. So I think that would be a great result for Geelong. They don't necessarily, they've got quite a few young players.
They've got an aging list, but also an emerging list.
Yeah.
Brian Myers, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, well, they got a lot of the VFL team, and I can't even think of the word.
Falcons.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of good players that come out of Geelong, and so a lot of players around that 23, 24-year-old mark are probably thinking, I want to get back to Geelong. You see Jack Stevens is wanting to get back there now, and I don't know how much I'd be giving for him, but it's a sort of a benefit you have being the only footy team in Geelong, is that if a player wants to go back to Melbourne, there's 10 clubs that they can go to. Whereas if they want to go to Geelong, there's only one.
Yeah, very true. And Brad Hill nominated St Kilda, and Freo were adamant pick 5 or 6.
6, I believe.
Yeah, one of the two. I get confused with once the compensation, the package for Gold Coast came through. I forget which pick is which now.
Yeah.
I think that'll be a fairly straightforward deal as well. I think what you might see is St Kilda split pick 6 or 5 or whatever they have at the moment for 2 later first round picks, and then use one of them in a Bradley Hill deal. I don't think Hill's worth a pick 6, to be completely honest. I'd save a pick 6 for a blue chip midfielder, but I wouldn't be surprised if they couldn't trade down, package the pick 6 for, Bradley Hill and like a second rounder or something.
Yeah, I think I've seen that floating around on the internet, is pick 6 for Brad Hill and pick 26, which, isn't the worst thing. And St Kilda, a bit of a nothing team this year. So I think they need to get that sort of...
Yeah, and they get Hanbury back, almost like having a new recruit.
Yeah.
He played, 5 games at the end of the season in garbage time. So it'll be like having a new recruit with Hanbury, assuming he gets up. But yeah, and what do you make of the Ellis deal? And apart from the fact that they paid way overs for him, as I've heard you say many times.
Yeah, I think Gold Coast spent about $500,000 too much on him. But, two-time premiership player, and you've locked him in for, was it 4 or 5 years or something? So I think it's a good move by them, even if it came at a big price, because you don't have to worry too much about him saying in 1 or 2 years, I'm out of here, I want to go back home to Melbourne, because I think once you get to Ellis's age, I think he's 26 or 27 or something, this is probably the last move that he'll want to make in his career. So I think it's a good move by them in terms of trying to build a culture at the club. And if they can hold on to pick 1 and 2 and not give them away, sort of chasing contracted players, then they can really start building a team there that's there for the long haul. Because I think the top 2 picks are best mates, and they're looking really good players. So if you can get them to play together and some more senior guys to stay there for a couple of years, then you never know, it could do what Brisbane did a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. They paid for the security of having Ellis at the club for 5 years, not for Ellis as a player. And they also have the cap space as well. So, I mean, it's not when it comes time for Ellis to get a new contract or be moved on. That's when all of the younger guns will start to get paid. So, I don't think it's too much of a risk at the moment. But I think Gold Coast have the potential to really do what GWS did. I mean, Lukosius, top 2 picks now, gun midfield as well, a lot of youngsters. So, I mean, if you're a young player, yes, it's Gold Coast and they've had a dodgy history, but it's not like you're going there at the start of the club like you were when they initiated, or GWS. They have a core there that has the potential to mimic GWS this season and making a grand final. So you'd probably like to hang around for 2-3 years and see how it eventuates. And if it's still going in the wrong direction, then maybe jump out then.
Yeah, and I think, and this is sort of going back to, I don't know whether we discussed it a couple of weeks ago when they announced the
package.
Yeah, the package for them. I would have liked to see them, rather than getting a number, I think they gave the number 2, but it essentially didn't matter whether they gave them 1 or 2.
I think it doesn't matter, yeah.
Yeah, I would rather have seen them maybe give concessions to Gold Coast in terms of what contracts they can offer. Maybe offer longer contracts or maybe a bit of salary cap leniency. I mean, I don't think they have any issues with their cap. I mean, they're all young kids, so it's not like there's any...
Yeah, they will all be on rookie contracts.
Yeah, but maybe in terms of the length they can offer on the rookie contract, just to entice people to stay there longer. I don't know. But I think just throwing young kids at them who leave after every 2 years.
Yeah, I heard, and this is probably the final point as we wrap up. I heard a really good point that they should have, in the package, given them a soft cap break, and that means you get the best physios in, the best coaches, all these kids, Noah Anderson and who's the number 1 pick?
I can't remember.
Forget it. Regardless, all these kids that have come through the TAC or whatever it's called now, they'll have had the best coaching, the best academies, the best facilities, the best everything to get them to AFL. So by giving them a soft cap concession, and you bring in the best coaches, you bring in the best physios, and you surround these kids with what they're used to, to get them to the next level. And all of a sudden, they're staying because the club is so focused on each individual becoming the best it can be. And I think that would have had a greater impact than, say, pick 1 or 2 as a package in future first rounders and second rounders. And it would mean that when the future first rounders, when Noah Anderson and whoever, we can't think of the first, whenever he steps through the doors, they're in an environment that's conducive to success, that's built for them to succeed in the AFL, as opposed to just getting to the Gold Coast and hoping that things will work out magically, So I thought that was a really good argument. And now that I've heard it, I would have liked to have seen that happen. And you saw the value of having the best physios and medical team have had with Hawthorn, and getting champion players on the cheap who have had injury problems, and then turning it around and turning the club around into champions. I mean, Sean Burgoyne came under huge injury clouds, and he's turned into a almost 400 game champion. So, I mean, if Gold Coast can do the same, then they build themselves for success. But obviously, these are just ifs and buts now because it didn't end up happening. But we'll wait with intrigue for the rest of the trade period, and we can talk in a couple of weeks about what ended up happening and what we think should have happened.
And moving on to the NFL, we had another big week, changed the landscape a lot of the league, I think, in a lot of games. So we're going to go over a few of them now. I guess we'll start with, I think it was the most recent one, or it happened today, Kansas City and Indianapolis. A terrible game for the Chiefs all round. What did you think, Mitch?
Well, I think people are sleeping on Indianapolis, and probably Indiana as well. But I think when Andrew Luck went out, people forgot about him, and I guess to their detriment. But they have a very good running back, and they just run it down the Chiefs' throat all day. I mean, Marlon Mack had 29 carries, and they just pounded it in every single time. No passing TDs.
Got to give credit to their O-line as well.
Yeah, I think they have a very good O-line. But I mean, Patrick Mahomes didn't have a terrible game. He still went for over 300 yards. I mean, that's probably what you'd expect from Big Paddy. But I mean,
he was the only reason why the game was even as close as it was.
Yeah.
I mean, Kansas are on their their 7th string wide receiver at the moment.
Yeah. Both their top 2 wide receivers are out. Their center was out. They had a rookie center.
Yeah, tell them.
They had also their left tackle as well. So Patrick Mahomes got sacked like 4 times today. And someone else too. I think it was their left outside linebacker as well was also out. So they were very injury riddled.
And Paddy got his ankle stepped on by his own O-line, which he limped off the field after that. So he looked a different player once the incident had affected him.
Yeah, well, he tweaked it in the first half after he got sacked again, because that was pretty much all that happened today was him running from the D-line of the Colts. So he tweaked it in the first half. He came back with it strapped, and then they were pinned down, I think on like the 4-yard line or something like that. And then same thing, pressure from the Colts D-line just pushed one of his 300-pound linemen onto his foot, which, like he said, the only reason they were in this game is because he was super mobile in the first half, and then in the second half couldn't do anything about it. And as per usual, their rushing game was completely non-existent. 36 total yards, 14 attempts. Travis Kelce had the worst game of the year. He dropped 3 or 4 catches, I'm pretty sure. Some of them very, very easy ones.
4 recorded catches from 10 targets tells you everything you need to know.
Cool. And it gave away like 3 stupid penalties as well. The Chiefs are in a bit of a spot of bother at the moment. They can't keep relying on Patrick Mahomes to have an 8-second scramble and throw a bullet like 40 yards into the end zone, and they're not going to win games that way. If you can't beat Indianapolis, how are you going to compete against the Patriots in the AFC Championship if they get that far?
Well, I think it's definitely still the Chiefs and the Patriots for the championship. But yeah, I agree. If you as Mitch said, don't sleep on the Colts. They have a very deep team. They built a team for Andrew Luck to win the Super Bowl this season. And, I mean, we were talking earlier that the 2 highest paid quarterback backups, or the backup quarterbacks probably would have been better, Jacoby Brissett and Teddy Bridgewater, they're the 2 that are really shining with the premier quarterback out, or in Jacoby Brissett's case, retired. But, it kind of shows the value of valuing your backup quarterback, because football is an inherently violent game, and you only need your own O-line to step on your ankle to be out for the rest of the season.
I think a good transition talking about backup quarterbacks is the Bears-Raiders game over in London. It was a embarrassing effort by the Bears for the most part. They was held scoreless in the first half and allowed 3 rushing TDs for the game, which they'd only allowed 1 for the other 4 games combined. So I think Chicago probably rocked up thinking, yeah, we've won this game already. All we have to do is rock up, and the Raiders really just took it to them and showed them up.
Well, the Raiders are 3-2 now, so they're no, easy beat or anything. And they definitely proved it in the first half against arguably one of the best defenses in the league. I mean, having Khalil Mack is enough to be considered, a top 5 or 10 defense in the league, but they've had more takeaways, more whatever key stat you want. They're top 5 in it consistently over the last 18 months, and for the Raiders to come out and put up 21 points to 0.
Yep.
I mean, that's alarm bells.
Yeah, and I think obviously, I was going to say this about the Chiefs before. You give every team a couple of losses that are just unexpected, and teams like the Chiefs and the Bears, you expect them. Maybe they'll drop a game they shouldn't have, but you expect them also to win ones. Well, not expect them, but you can see them winning ones that you might not necessarily expect them to win. So I wouldn't be surprised if, the Chiefs lost to Indianapolis today, but you never know. When they play the Patriots, Patty Mahomes might just turn it on and they really take it to them and could beat them. So with teams like this, I don't think 1 or 2 losses will define them, but I hope this is a wake-up call for the Bears. And, you really see what you miss when you don't have that. And I use this term very loosely, elite, not even elite, but first-string quarterback with Trubisky out. So, oh well.
And I think what definitely helped the Raiders was establishing a run game against the Bears, because they often just cut it off and then cut off the subsequent passing game that teams rely on. So they just rammed it down their throat, which opened up passing lanes, which meant Derek Carr actually looked half decent. So,
well, I think the key to beating the Bears is to run the ball and run it from hard, and you're not going to get big yards per carry. But if you keep running it, the strength of the Chicago Bears defense, in my opinion, isn't built around Khalil Mack. It's built around Eddie Jackson at safety and how much ground he can cover. And that allows players like Kyle Fuller and Prince Amukamara to get those takeaways and bat down all those passes, because they can jump routes knowing that Bojack's got them in the backfield. So I think the way, if you want to beat the Bears, you got to run it down those throats and not let the safeties or the cornerbacks come into the game at all, because that's how they'll take it away from you and score.
And on the backup quarterback train, I've lost my place here. Teddy Bridgewater with the Saints. He's 3-0 now this season. I think every Saints fan on the planet would be just doing dances to whatever god there is or they think exists. I mean, to be 4-1 without Drew Brees, and Drew Brees is coming back, boy oh boy, they look like they're in a really strong position now. When he went down, I think Saints fans would have just been hoping to scrape into the playoffs and then on the back of the return of Brees and then try to win the Super Bowl that way. But now it looks like they're vying for that number 1 spot in the NFC.
Yeah, Terry Bridgewater, has played fantastic. Exactly what we were saying before, that the teams, them and the Colts with Jacoby Brissett, the teams with the highest paid backups, doing very, very well. It's only week 5, and a third of the league has had to use a backup quarterback either by choice, retirement, or injury. And the teams that made the biggest investment, which are the Saints and the Colts, in their backup quarterbacks, are doing by far the best out of any of those teams. So I think it might also change, I guess, a bit of the landscape and a bit of how much emphasis people put into backup quarterbacks. But like you were saying, this is still Drew Brees' team. Terry Bridgewater's definitely a placeholder. I think they said he's out for at least another 3 weeks, Drew Brees. And in that time, the Saints have got the Jags, which they should win. The Bears, if they played like they did today, the Saints will beat them. And then the Cardinals. So they could, what are they, 4-1 now? They could very easily be 7-1 by the time that Drew Brees gets back. That holds very well for them, like looking postseason.
And even better is they don't have to rush back Drew Brees whenever he is healed. They can take that extra week to make sure that he's 100% and won't re-injure or re-aggravate the injury. Whereas, let's say, just take my team, the Steelers, for instance. Let's say they weren't 1-4 and were 2-3 or 3-2, and we're in the scrap for the playoffs, and we're in the same situation with Ben Roth. I know he's out for the season, but let's say he's coming back in a few weeks, and you're in that scrap. Then all of a sudden you throw him in and just say, "Look, I know your elbow's 80%, buddy, but we need a big dub against whoever." You throw him in, re-aggravates it, out for the season. And if that happened to Breeze, yeah, Bridgewater's playing well, but he's not going to beat Tom Brady or anything. So it just means that if they do end up 7-1 or even 6-2, I'd take that. And Drew Brees like, I'm 95%. Say, mate, we're 6-2. Just take the week off. Come back at 100%. Even if we're 6-3, it's fine. We have you back at the helm at 100%. We'd take 6-3 every day of the week.
Yeah, and Drew Brees is not the kind of guy who needs a lot of games to get ready for the playoffs. Like, you could very well drop him in to the Super Bowl, just, having not played all year, and expect a good performance from him. He's every bit of a, successful veteran. Exactly what you said, having Terry Bridgewater playing well. And it's not, so like Jacoby Brissett had one attempt over 15 yards. So he's not going out there and trying to kill it. Like, he's just taking all his checkdowns, handing the ball off, doing what he needs to do. Terry Bridgewater's out there playing. Like, 26 to 34 completions and some big ones to Michael Thomas. Like, he's out there playing like it's his team. Whereas Jacoby Brissett is still taking a while to sort of, I guess, find his confidence and sort of find his footing, which is, understandable. Like, it was Andrew Luck's team till like 2 days before the season started or whenever it was. So, yeah, Terry Bridgewater's playing fantastic. But
he's proved what he can do with a line in front of him, whereas I think we were judging him based on the pocket collapsing. And I think most quarterbacks, if not all, would struggle with a failing offensive line. So Bridgewater's probably writing the script correct, or writing the wrongs in the script, if you will, of his reputation by having a line in front of him. And he's like, guys, this is what I can actually do when I've given time to play.
yeah, and depending on what Drew Brees decides to do at the end of the year, don't be surprised if you see Terry Bridgewater starting for another team next season. Like, if Brees says he's going to stay on for another few years, Terry Bridgewater could easily get a starting job on 75-80% of the teams in the NFL at the moment. So
Definitely the Dolphins.
definitely the Dolphins. So yeah, it's a win-win for the Saints. Everything's going well. Can't say too much more.
Yeah, nailed it. What do we want to look at next? Should we continue the theme of backup quarterbacks and look at the Jags Panthers just quickly? Christian, there's two players we'll look at in the game, and they're the only reason why we're looking at the game. Gardner Minshew, who I have taken inspiration for my haircut. and Mustache this week, and also Christian McCaffrey. What do you fellas think at the moment? If the season was to end, do you reckon McCaffrey would be the MVP of the league?
No, because you have to be a quarterback to win that award, Jimmy. Come on. I think if the NFL can give that award to a quarterback, they will. And I think there's a few quarterbacks at the moment that are staking their name to that claim. But if there's any other player in the league that's going to win it, that's not outside from a quarterback, it's going to be CMC.
He had almost 240, almost, I think it was a bit under, all-purpose yards. And I think if the Panthers don't have Christian McCaffrey, they start the season 0-5. I think Cam Newton is a liability if he's not at his peak. And even at his peak, he's just an average quarterback. And without Christian McCaffrey, I think they start 0-5.
Cam Newton, who has won that award before.
Yeah, so he's a one-dimensional quarterback.
I think MVP has never gone to the actually most valuable player in the league.
Very true.
If that was the case, I mean, you look at the NBA, for example, and D'Angelo Russell would have won the MVP last year because he was the only player to show up in Brooklyn, except maybe there's a handful of players that occasionally showed up. But I think it goes to and it will go to the quarterback. And I think at this stage, it's hard to look past someone like Russell Wilson, who's playing.
Yeah, Wilson, Patty Mahomes.
Yeah, Lamar Jackson even. I mean, he's had some quieter games, but you see that dual threat quarterback. There's
the NFL are trying
precedent.
to make it work.
Yeah, so I don't know. I think there's two big names that played in that game, Minshew and McCaffrey, and that was about the most entertaining part of it.
And just on that, Minshew, 2 touchdowns, 374 yards. I mean, the guy is looking like he was taken in the first round when he was a 6th round selection by the Jags. So was Tom Brady. But the Jags, I think the Jags have accidentally found their franchise quarterback. And I'll be very interested to see what happens when Nick Foles comes back. If Minshew continues to play like this. I think if he slightly drops off, they probably bring Foles back and let Minshew just develop alongside Foles. But if he keeps balling out like this, not making mistakes and throwing up nearly 400 yards, and they don't quite have a winning record, but it's not bad, 2-3, then I wouldn't be surprised if Nick Foles finds himself as the backup quarterback to one Gardner Minshew, who needs a proper name, a proper human name.
It'd be a good story, wouldn't it?
Definitely. I'm rooting for him, as well. None of the listeners can see, as my mustache would say, would tell you. What do we want to look at next? Packers Cowboys.
I was just about to say the train I've been on for a while, even though it kills me every week. I'm going to have to preface this by it kills me to say that the Packers are good, but
I have to apologise then because I said they're overrated.
Well, people have been talking up Dallas as a really strong team, and I think Green Bay just demolished them. 10 points is a comfortable win.
Yes and no. Dak Prescott, despite the scoreline, despite everything, still threw for almost 500 yards, 463 yards. So it's not like the Cowboys couldn't move the ball. It's just that Dak made some inexcusable turnovers, errors, and they also only gave Ezekiel Elliott the ball 12 times, which is absurd for a guy you just paid money to.
This is the exact same thing that happened when the Rams played whoever it was last week, and Todd Gurley got the ball like 12 times. Like, they got down early, and then they were playing catch-up the entire game, and so catch-up in the NFL means you need to throw the ball and not give it to easily the best player on your team, and
Arguably the league.
And, like, you know, like you give him 12 carries in a game. Yeah, I get it. You're coming from behind. You need to stop the clock. You need to score points. But giving Ezekiel Elliott 12 carries while giving Amari Cooper 11 or 14 targets, like, yeah, I don't think it's going to be a successful game plan for them to have Dak Prescott try and orchestrate a spread throwing offense for an entire game.
Well, I don't think Dak has ever been that quarterback. He's always been a game manager, quarterback, defense does well, and he just gives the ball to whoever's open, whether it be Ezekiel Elliott or, you know, Amari Cooper on a quick slant or whatever. And that's literally all he does. Once he starts being expansive, then you see the 3 picks that he has today and just some absurd throws that you think, how are you going to get paid at your next contract negotiation?
And the Packers did all this without arguably their second best, well, not arguably, their second best player, Devontae Adams, who's probably one of the best wide receivers going around at the moment. So, I mean, that sort of explains why they just ran the ball as much as they could. But I mean, Aaron Rodgers, very, very good quarterback. And I think last year he was playing under an injury cloud. This year, I think we might see him back to his old form.
I was going to say, it looks like he's back to his 2017 form. He just looks, he just flicked the ball like 60 yards, and I just had to pick my jaw up off the ground. I was like, how is that even possible? Like, why are you flicking? I don't know. I dropped science as soon as I could, so I don't understand the physics of it, but it just looks impossible to me. Rams Seahawks, great game.
What a game! Thursday night football
at its best. The Seahawks probably, do we say surprised many, or I don't know.
I think people forget about the Seahawks. They were in the Super Bowl, was it 2 or 3 years ago, and they won the Super Bowl not long ago. And they have the highest paid quarterback who's at the moment showing why he is the highest paid quarterback going around. And the Rams, at the same time, the Rams are looking vulnerable. So I was surprised at the result, and I'm surprised that the Seahawks are 4-1. But, I mean, I also had a little bit of a sneaky suspicion that the Rams might go and lose this game.
Why is that?
Well, after what they dished up last week, and I know they just, was it the Bucks jumped out to a lead really quickly, and they just had to try and play catch up. But I mean, you see, even again this week, Todd Gurley only had 15 carries. Todd Gurley is probably your best player outside of Aaron Donald, your best offensive player, and you're giving him the ball 15 times. And it's not like they were 3 scores down from the get-go. It was a tight game the whole way. So,
and like he only averaged 3.5 yards a carry, but also nearly all his carries were inside the red zone. Nearly all of them.
Yeah. And so I don't know, maybe it's, I don't know what the coaching, obviously they know more about football than I do, but you just have to scratch your head why your best defensive weapon, you're hardly giving him the rock.
And I think LA's defense has just been a shadow of what we know it to be recently, in the last 2 games in particular. And I think LA's recipe for success is their defense. And if they don't step up, then they're sort of doomed to fail. They had 1 sack and 4 tackles for losses for the entire game against Russell Wilson. I mean, it's a bit like Tom Brady. If you don't put pressure on him, if you don't make him uncomfortable in the pocket, get him checking down, or whatever it is that you
Scrambling.
need to unnerve Tom Brady, then he's just going to pick you apart. So of course Russell Wilson's going to go out and win you the game if you can only get one sack on him.
Yeah. And I think it sort of shows that with a defense that's not only got Aaron Donald, there are some other good players. There's quite a few other good players there, but it's mainly the Aaron Donald show is that, I mean, when he's not getting sacks, they're not playing well. So, and you also see Jared Goff has almost 50 attempts. I mean, when you've invested so heavily in Todd Gurley, I just don't know how that can be the strategy.
He's got more throwing yards and far more attempts than even Patrick Mahomes has. He's the leading passer in the league. But Patrick Mahomes has Shady McCoy in the backfield, and you've got Todd Gurley.
And Patrick Mahomes is throwing it to Travis Kelce and, not this season, but he was throwing it to what's his name, Tyreek Hill. So, and I mean, there's some good receivers on the Rams, but they're no Chiefs receiving core.
Cooper Kupp had 9 receptions from 17 targets. Okay, that's not 17 times you got to give the ball to Todd Gurley.
Yeah, I mean, even if you gave the ball to Todd Gurley 6 more times, you think just let him loose.
And another game I wanted to get your guys' opinions on. It technically was last week in the NFL, but it was after the last podcast we did, was the Browns game. So the Browns beat Baltimore 40-25. Baker Mayfield played well. Odell Beckham had 2 receptions that whole game. They did not pass him the ball once. They didn't pass him the ball very much at all. They
passed it to him twice.
They simply just used him as a decoy for Jarvis Landry and a couple of their other receivers and giving the ball to Nick Chubb. There's been a bit of a dialogue that this is a great formula for the Browns to win. Baker Mayfield gets a lot of confidence because instead of trying to throw into double coverage, which Odell Beckham is always going to be double covered, he's getting easy slants and easy routes on the other side of the field. What do you think is going to give up first? Odell Beckham's attitude, he's just going to get sick. He loves the ball more than anybody I know in the NFL loves the ball. So I think it's going to be very interesting, and I want to get your thoughts on whether or not Odell Beckham is going to be happy that they go on and keep winning games, but he's not getting the ball.
I think this ties in nicely to another game I want to talk about that we'll touch on a bit later, the Vikings game. But I think drama matters a lot less when you're winning. And so, and I don't know, obviously, I don't know OBJ, but I think he's going to be a lot happier only having 2 receptions in a winning team than having 5 receptions in a losing team. So,
well, that's why he left the Giants too. Sick of losing.
Yeah, and I think if this is the recipe for the Browns to win, and I really think it is, then if it was me, I'd be more than happy to run down the field and attract 2 guys and let Juice and Bradley Chubb.
You also got to understand that this is just going to help him even more in the playoffs, because if teams going to keep double teaming him and opening up the flats for Nick Chubb, Jarvis Landry to do his thing, and whoever else wants to get open, then your defense is just going to get shredded. I mean, you don't need to be bloody Tom Brady to hit those targets. You can be Baker Mayfield to hit an easy slant. So that's going to mean that defenses are going to have to adjust against the Browns. And what does the adjustment mean? The adjustment means when come playoff time, that OBJ is going to get open more. So if you take the onus away from OBJ now and get teams thinking, oh crap, there's still others that we have to worry about. Jarvis Landry's open every time if we're just going to double team OBJ, then I think come playoff time, it will free him up even more because they'll have to adjust for the open routes. You can't continue to get shredded in the flats and in short passing range, because I mean they're easy throws. You'll take them all day. 4, 5, 6, 7, and if you're being a bit risky, 9 or 10, 8, 9, 10 yards, and go down the field, OBJ. Who
I
cares?
think teams will have to start respecting the other two offensive threats that the Browns have in Chubb and Landry. But I think also another thing that might play into it is Baker Mayfield patient enough to play games where he's only getting 5-6 yards at a time and he doesn't get to throw that big 50-yard bomb down to Odell Beckham Jr. for a big touchdown.
Well, that's what I'm saying. If you keep doing that, being patient in the flats and in the short passing range, then that 50-yard bomb will be there to OBJ when the defense makes the adjustment to try to take that away. So, but that ties into, is he patient enough to do that, to open that up for the 50-yard bomb later in the game?
Well, I don't even think it's later in the game thing. I think it's going to have to be later in the season. And is he going to be able to put together another 4, 5, 6 games where he's just throwing it 5 yards at a time? I don't think he can do that. There's nothing that I've seen of Baker Mayfield that suggests that he's disciplined like that, like a Tom Brady or a Daniel Jones or someone like that who can just say, I'm just going to sit in the pocket, and if I need to throw it 3 yards and do that 4 times in a row, I can do that.
And they're coming up against the 49ers next week or tomorrow. So I think he's going to struggle. Obviously, the Ravens are fantastic, especially their secondary. But personally, I think OBJ's attitude is going to give out first. I don't think he's going to be able to go the next 7 weeks of the season. We're getting 2 receptions a game because it's not even they're only passing him the ball when he's open. They're not even looking at him. They're pretty much setting him up on the left side, drawing double, triple coverage. And they're just not looking at him at all. He's a star player. He likes to be the star. He likes the spotlight to be on him, as we saw last season. I think his attitude's going to give out first, and I think you're going to have a Stephon Diggs situation.
Well, yeah, I mean...
I love the club.
Yeah. Well, it's a good segue into the next game we could talk on is the Vikings-Giants. And I think, as I said earlier, drama matters a lot less when you start winning.
Yeah, so help me timeline this a bit. So Kirk Cousins had a terrible game last week. Some very, very poor passing. Adam Thielen came out after the game and said, if we can't rush for 200 yards, we need to be able to pass the ball. And Kirk Cousins not doing that at the moment. Then I believe Stephon Diggs got upset because Kirk Cousins tried to apologize on his podcast and said, Adam Thielen's, what did he say?
The best player, one of the best players in the league. He basically heaped praise all over Thielen, saying that it was all his fault and it should have been all the Thielen show. And Diggs spat the dummy and didn't rock up to work.
I was going to say,
dig at him.
Yeah, and then coincidentally he was sick the next training day.
Well, they said it was not a injury related. I don't know whether that covers sickness, but
I think he said that he had the flu or something like that. But then he turned up later, and then they were asking, what did they say? Did you request a trade?
Yeah, there's a lot of that going around.
And he was very dancing around the subject and, I don't want to talk about it. And then today, after they won, in his post game interview, he was like, oh yeah, I love being in Minnesota, and then winked at all the reporters. So it's like, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean,
let's not forget that it's the Giants defense before we get too carried away with Minnesota and winning. I mean, I could go for positive yards against the Giants defense at the moment.
The Giants,
because I'd just be handing it off to Cook the whole game.
I mean, yeah, and I think that's a lot of what they did was just give it to Dalvin Cook. But I think it was
then throw a screen to get positive yards.
It was an important win for Minnesota, and I think if you're and I was listening to this, I can't remember who it was talking about it, but they said, look, you've either got to, if you're going to do something about this, because I think that you're starting to see the fractures in the team, you either got to go all in on Kirk Cousins or all in on Stephon Diggs. Either you get rid of Kirk Cousins and you say, we're going to fight, skull in on Stephon Diggs and say, we'll find a quarterback that will get you the ball. Or if you trade Stephon Diggs, you're saying, okay, this is the Kirk Cousins show. This is Kirk Cousins' team, and we're going to build it around him.
I think they paid him too much not to do that.
But also, do they pay him too much to then give away one of the best receivers at the moment?
And the thing is, if they go, okay, we're going to go in on Stephon Diggs, I believe Stephon Diggs is in a contract year, if I'm not mistaken. So if they ditch Kirk Cousins middle of this season, try and get somebody else in, okay, great. Stephon Diggs is still not happy, and then you're down Kirk Cousins and Stephon Diggs, and then Adam Thielen's like, I want to play for a winner. Then he leaves as well, and your whole team, it just dissipates like that. So it's going to be very interesting. I wouldn't be surprised if they're going to get rid of someone. I think it's going to be Diggs, just because he seems more inclined to leave as opposed to, stay. Like, I feel like he's going to be way more inclined just to go, oh, I'm going to leave, as opposed to, oh, Kirk Cousins should leave. I don't think he's super. It doesn't seem like, if you're just going to not turn up and then come and insinuate that you want to be traded and you don't want to be there, I think Minnesota's going to put their foot down and trade him somewhere.
Yeah, and I mean, I wasn't saying that like either one was a better or worse, but that's just what they've got to consider: is do we put our chips on Cousins or Diggs?
I think it's still a week or two away from anything happening. I would imagine Diggs wouldn't spit the dummy just yet, because if they go on a bit of a tear and Kirk Cousins, takes his finger out of his, and they ball out, and he might be inclined to stay and see what's what, because they have a very talented team, and dare I say it, they could be there at the final game of the season. They have spent a lot on their defense, and they have a talented offense as well. So, if the chips fell in a certain way, they could be there in the last Sunday.
They have the list to do it.
Yeah,
It's
that's what I'm saying. Whether they'll do it or not is not my point. Like, whether they are a Super Bowl team is irrelevant. Just like my Steelers had the list to be a Super Bowl team a couple of years ago, whether they do it or not, that's up to their coaching staff and the players themselves. So it's not like Minnesota don't have the talent. It's what they do with it now that is the real defining factor.
I don't think you'll ever see Kirk Cousins steering around a Super Bowl team, though. And also, the Vikings got Philadelphia next as well, which is going to be a rough day out for them. And I think it's just going to compound all the issues they're currently having at the moment. Like Mitch said before, everything's a little bit easier to deal with when you're winning, and I don't think they're going to win next week. I think they're going to lose, and lose pretty badly. So I agree with you, Jimmy, that I think it's at least 2 weeks from anything happening. I think it will drag out a little bit longer, but next week will be very interesting.
Well, if Kirk Cousins takes it upon himself to correct the ship's course, if you will.
The Viking ship.
I was trying to weave in that pun somehow. Hands it off to Dalvin Cook, gets Diggs and Thielen involved. There's no reason why Minnesota can't beat the Eagles. So, come next week, Minnesota could just, this whole saga could be ancient history, but it really depends which Kirk Cousins shows up and which Minnesota shows up, I guess. I could easily see them winning a hard-fought game, and I could also easily see them losing like 42-10. It'd be funny if they lost 42-10 now.
I think then Stephon Diggs would be like, I am out of here, boys.
I will hire Jimmy as my manager. He predicted everything. I am available, Stephon Diggs. That wraps up the Water Sport podcast, which would not be possible without our sponsors over at Pizza Strata and Bar. Boys, thanks for coming on, and here's to another awesome week of sport.